Okay, we're live. So, hi, thanks everybody for joining. I think I mentioned this before. I've never done this in the middle of the day before. I've usually done it kind of later, and so I thought I'd just join you during your lunchtime, if it is at lunchtime for you. If you haven't done this before, this is a live question and answer. Usually I do with OCD, but I know I've got Amanda here with me, and she knows BFRBs really, really well. And so I wanted to add that kind of to the mix. So BFRBs, such as like hair pulling, skin picking, and really just any other BFRBs, the treatment's the same. And so, since I've got Amanda here, I thought instead of me trying to introduce you, since I don't know everything about you, I thought it'd be great if you just kind of mentioned who you are and what you do.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. And I'm the reason that you're doing this in the middle of the day. I think it was the only time that worked out. So thank you. My name is Amanda. I am a licensed clinical professional counselor in Kansas, but also licensed in Colorado, Nebraska, Maine. You can see clients in Florida, and I specialize in OCD and body-focused repetitive behaviors. And I have an OCD exposure coloring book available on Amazon, just if you need an extra little bit of practice with some of your exposures. And I do all telehealth. I think that's it. That's me.
Yeah. Well, and I've seen your coloring book. It's amazing.
Thank you.
It's something that, like, if you don't know, when we do exposures, there's so many different variations of things we can do, and like actually drawing a picture or having something already laid out for you, which is what Amanda's created, which I think is pretty neat. That like Harm OCD, I think I saw in there, scrupulosity, like all these different topics, and yeah.
A little bit of everything. I think I was doing doodles or drawings of the word hell and pictures of hell one time with a client, and then I was like, I need to make this into a book, and then it just kind of became fun. I mean, we have a pedophile page, we have you name it. So
yeah,
as long as people know what go ahead.
I don't know if you've experienced this, but sometimes with people that I work with, I'm like, hey, let's draw this or let's color this, and they're like, that's going to do nothing for my anxiety or OCD. But then when they get to it, they're like, yikes, like it actually brings a little bit of anxiety. And I'm sure you definitely facilitate with what you've come up with that.
Yeah, it's a lot harder than what it just sounds like coloring a page. But
yeah. And so we've got a few people trickling in right now, and I've already got a few questions. And so if you can, I try to say, have your questions all kind of in one big block, because if there are a bunch of different ones, it's hard to put them up on the screen and figure out, where they all are. And so I'm just going to pull some up here, and we're just going to start getting through them. So let me find one really quick. Okay. And so this one's from Allison. Can intrusive thoughts from OCD be visual? When my anxiety is extreme, I thought of stabbing someone, but when I got the faint image of the person with blood running down their arm, it scared me. So thank you. I know some of these questions and things people say can feel, like I wasn't expecting to see that right off the bat, first question. But it's important to talk about this kind of stuff, because this is what OCD is all about. So can OCD be visual? I kind of have my own thoughts on it, but what do you think, Amanda?
Yeah, actually the definition obsessions, the O in OCD, it can be intrusive thoughts, images, or urges. And a lot of people think it's just a thought, but yeah, the images, this picture that pops up in your head can be included in obsessions. It can be just as scary, if not more, as Allison mentioned, just all of a sudden this gory graphic picture with blood running down. To me, that's pretty common with OCD.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. And realistically, everybody has intrusive thoughts, even thoughts like this, whether you have OCD or not. And the idea is that I can have a thought like this and it doesn't really affect me. It's more of kind of like, oh, that was kind of a strange thought. But I know when the anxiety is attached to that, it wants to make it a really big meaning for that person. And I had someone message me the other day, and they're like, I've done a lot of recovery work and I've done a lot of exposures, and I still have these thoughts, but my anxiety is gone. And it's one of those things that's like, wow, welcome to everybody else. Like that's kind of what happens is like we have these thoughts sometimes and there's no anxiety attached to it, that's the realistic kind of way with how treatment works. Is you might continue having these thoughts, you might not. So definitely common for this to happen. So I'm gonna do one more from Allison here, but does diet affect OCD? I don't know
I'm curious
on this, Amanda.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I know I hear a lot about different foods. People talk about different foods impact their anxiety. So obviously, if you're feeling more intense anxiety, that could impact your OCD. I don't actually know research-wise if there are specific foods or diet that it can impact OCD, but I guess it's a possibility.
Yeah, research-wise, the only thing that I know, at least what I have my people do, is like we want to control what we have control over. So if you can eat healthy, let's try it. If you can drink a lot of water, let's try it. Because they say like the brain shrinks when you don't have enough water. And so I don't know what the effects would be for OCD, but like let's drink enough water, for instance. Not saying that's going to be like a cure or anything, but focusing on diet, I've seen people just naturally, without OCD, they feel better. And so why not mentally? And it's kind of my thoughts.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So let me pull another one up here. Got one here from Jamie. Hi, Nathan. Thank you so much for all your work. Today I began OCD ERP treatment for the first time. Wow. Do you have any suggestions for a first appointment? I've never gone through therapy before. Like,
congrats!
That's amazing. Yeah.
That's big. Like,
I know how scary that can be and how much people think about that first appointment before they even get in there. First appointment, I always say like, tell them everything, which I know can sound scary. If they are an actual specialist with OCD, they're going to definitely know what you're going through. But saying everything, yeah.
Yeah, my same thought is I know it's so hard to go in with a stranger and tell them all these, what you think are scary thoughts. But if it's a true specialist, they're not even going to bat an eye. They've heard it all before. And so, no need to worry about judgment or something bad happening. It's not to be reassuring here, but
right.
Just tell them everything.
It is so true because it takes OCD out of the darkness when we talk about it. Mm-hmm. And it's definitely something that like when you just get it out, it takes the pressure away from like, oh, I still have this secret that I haven't told them. And I still have this secret, which OCD loves to live in those little secret moments and make it a really big deal. So
it's kind of like a first level exposure right there. I've had so many clients they don't want to share it because it's too scary. And right there, just saying it out loud is confronting it.
Oh, for sure. I've had people even bring me big documents that they've written out. Here is like this specific thought or fear that I have. I'm writing everything out because I'm afraid I'm not going to tell you. And they just like hand it to me when I get in there. And I always think that's amazing that people will do that because it takes a lot of strength.
Yeah, to hold themselves accountable. I'm going to write it down. So just in case I chicken out, here you go.
Yeah. And what I say about ERP or exposure and response prevention therapy is that at least what I tell my clients is like, you're actually the boss of your own treatment. And so we're going to come up with ideas together. And I want you I could tell you like, pick up this thing. Like, I don't know why I have scissors right here, but like pick up these scissors and you're like, I'm totally not ready for that. Like, tell me that you're not ready for that. And let's talk about it and figure out some different steps that for people to be successful is like, I want them to feel empowered and be the boss of their own treatment.
Oh, completely. And they're the only ones that can tell us what their goal is as far as exposures. I'm not going to make my agenda their agenda. So definitely need their help creating their hierarchy.
For sure. Well, good. We've got Emily here. Can my skin picking and nail biting be subconscious anxiety? Most of the time I don't even realize I'm doing it. And so,
Yeah, there's a couple different kinds of BFRBs. There's the focused, concentrated, where you know you're engaging in it. But also what it kind of sounds like Emily is describing is the kind of the unaware, habitual, subconscious, where it's like a lot of clients will tell me they're just doing it and they don't even realize it until somebody like brings their attention to the skin picking or the BFRB. And anxiety can definitely be behind some of these behaviors. So
yeah. I usually look at that anxiety piece, definitely. Is this happening only when there's anxiety? Is it possibly a compulsion that the person's doing? Or if it is that very subconscious, I like what you said, there's the automatic and the focused. And when it's very automatic, usually what we try to do is know why it's automatic. What are those times where it's happening the most? Because you know at some point that it happened. We try to pay attention to like, okay, am I feeling anxiety about it? Is it happening only during dinner time? Is it when I'm in the car? Paying attention to those things to help you understand a little bit better why it's happening. And so very, very common, I'd say quite a lot of people I work with are very automatic when they do these behaviors. And
then that's part of the treatment, is also to help bring their awareness to the behavior, like you said, by identifying any patterns, cues, environmental triggers, so that they become more aware of when that behavior is happening.
Yeah, because how can you treat it if you don't know what's going on or when it's happening? I mean, that's the whole first part of that type of treatment. And it definitely can help with, usually I say if we can reduce that anxiety by doing some type, exposure and response prevention, and you see that the nail biting and all that starts reducing, then you're like, oh, it probably was a compulsion then that I was doing. Because those usually follow the same line.
Mm-hmm. You had a lot of questions. People are watching.
Yeah. Okay. Got Chelsea here. I recognize Chelsea. I think she's in my group, Facebook group here. I've noticed my typical OCD theme is not hindering me anymore, but I am constantly remembering it and worrying that I will always think about it and will never completely be free of it. And this is so hard.
It's so common. I don't know about you, Nathan. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I often put this in that category, what I call meta OCD, where it's like now we're obsessing about obsessing. Like we're worried, am I going to get that obsession back? Am I going to get worse? I'm getting better. Why am I getting better? Did I make it up? So it's obsessing about obsessing. Because the fact that Chelsea mentions like my actual theme is better, but now I'm worried about the fact that, if it's going to come back. So then we do the exact same treatment, but now for these fears, like, yeah, maybe it'll come back. Who knows? We don't know the course of treatment.
Yeah. On the same lines, meta OCD is kind of what comes to my mind is people are, they start feeling, we kind of mentioned the very first question, like the anxiety starts to reduce, but thoughts sometimes continue. And so people start worrying like, oh, I hope this doesn't mean something because I'm not feeling anxious about it. Or it's the body automatically checks sometimes every morning. How is it now? Am I still thinking about it? Am I still worried about it? And it's just like that never-ending cycle. And so for me, it's like we do ERP or exposures on that of like, let's risk that it's going to come back and change that response completely that you have because of it. That I might wake up in the morning and be like, oh, I sure hope I have this theme that comes in my mind today, or this image, or I hope this happens. That would be so wonderful. That just ruined my meeting today. Instead of like, okay, is this going to happen? Is this going to happen? I don't know if this is going to come back. What if it does come back? That we don't want to problem solve through it. We just want to be like, if it happens, it happens. And really, like, when we change that whole response, it completely changes the way that the brain thinks about something like that. Because if I want it to happen, it's probably not going to happen. I might, but it's when I don't want it to happen is when it happens.
I know there's probably no research behind this, but just what I've observed with clients, when they kind of get to that meta OCD stage, like they've actually made so much progress in treatment that now, they've mastered the Harm OCD or the pedophile OCD, and it's now gotten to a point where what else is OCD going to attack but itself, and make you wonder if you're really better, if it's going to come back. And it's just so interesting. I've noticed across the board, whenever I have a client start telling me these worries, and I'm like, well, that's a good thing. That means you've like made a lot of progress in all those other scary themes. That now your biggest value is being well and doing treatment correct. And so you fear, what if it's not working?
Yeah, totally. I'm on the same boat of like, it's kind of a strange conundrum because it's like I'm almost excited that they're in that mode, but it's like, dang it, like there's something else that's there. But it just means you probably have done a lot of work in what you're doing and did a good job, and we want to focus on the progress as well. Yeah. So said, hi Nathan and Amanda, great stream. I hope you can help me out. Lately, I've been ruminating and just goes nonstop. The level is so high, unlike before. Do you have any advice on what to do when it attacks? Rumination tends to be a pretty big topic recently that people are talking about and what to do about it. Rumination, I don't know about you, Amanda, but people have different ideas of like, just don't engage with the rumination, but it's like, how do you not engage with the rumination? Like, you can't just say don't engage. For me, I say we don't put any judgment or value really to any thoughts that come our way. And thoughts that are coming, in my mind, I think, how can I respond completely different to these thoughts that are coming through? Which is hard because it's like, wait, isn't that engaging with it? Because I'm trying to respond differently.
It's always so hard whenever I hear someone ask about rumination, like how to respond, because I feel like it's going to be a case-by-case example. For some individuals, their rumination, their thoughts, like they actually end up, their compulsion is to try to stop the rumination. They're trying so hard not to think the thoughts. So I kind of respond like you said, where it's like, no, I want you to notice it non-judgmentally, just kind of acknowledge that that's happening. Whereas others, like the rumination is the real compulsion, like they're trying to solve it. They're trying to figure it out. And so then we might try something different, just saying, I want you to name 5 things you see, like some kind of mindfulness or grounding technique in the moment, so that they're almost not allowing their mental compulsion to try to solve and just get stuck in cycle. And so we're kind of pulling that attention away. But it's really different because that could also be distraction, and that could be somebody else's compulsion. So you really, as a therapist, we have to figure out like, what is OCD or anxiety like urging you to do? And we're going to try to help you find a better path.
Yeah. I like that you said that, case-by-case basis, because that's really what it is.
Yeah.
What I find with any rumination is it's usually a question in mind, that problem solving, whatever it's going to be. And for me, I can't tell you specifically what to do, but I have people answer all ruminating thoughts with 2 things. One of them is either maybe, maybe not, to every single thought that comes their way, or they're just saying totally to it, which is like, sounds horrible. Like, are you going to lose your job someday? I don't know, totally. I might, maybe, maybe not. And it's so constant that like, sometimes it's like, I'm just going to spend time with the thoughts and allow it to be. And I'm answering it the same way every single time. Because the idea isn't to get rid of the thoughts, it's to change that response that your body's having because you're having those thoughts.
Right.
So that's the part that I focus on. When people are like, how can I stop ruminating? It's like, you don't stop ruminating. You just change the way your body's responding.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, got Liam. Hi, I have intrusive thoughts about suicide, and it tends to ruminate over I tend to ruminate over them for a lot of the day. I try not to do a compulsion, that is searching, but it's hard to stop searching and just scroll. Good for you for trying not to do the compulsion. I know that's really, really, really hard. So I don't know if you have any advice or any thoughts for them, Amanda?
I'm actually thinking a lot of the same stuff we just talked about with rumination. If the goal is to like problem solve, so one individual's might like stop on, I don't know what SM is, I feel out of the loop. But let's say on
I know,
Facebook,
I'm getting too old.
if you find something, an article about someone that just died by suicide, if OCD is like, I need to stop, I need to focus on this, I need to research it, solve it, see if I'm, in any danger, then yeah, we're going to help you. Just continue living according to your values. I'm going to keep scrolling. I'm going to go look at my friends, pictures of their wedding, their baby, and try to keep going. However, for some, scrolling might be their compulsion. Like they're trying to distract. They're trying not to look at that article, in which case we would do the opposite and say, exposure is, I want you to read that article. So again, every situation is going to be so different. But in this one, it sounds like he actually understands himself pretty well and he wants to stop and look at everything. And so we're going to work on and keep scrolling on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes we practice that. I'm going to get online and I'm going to practice being able to just scroll on. And if something does trigger me, then man, I'm going to engage with it, depending on the person. But yeah.
I always find it so hard doing Q&As because I'm like, it just depends so much. But
so true.
One person's compulsion is another person's value, and vice versa. So
yeah,
good assessment.
There's not going to be that same answer for every person.
Right. And I always give that a little caveat saying, just because we mention, hey, this might be a good technique, doesn't mean it's the good technique for you. Yours might be totally different.
Yeah, totally. It doesn't mean Nate and Amanda told me to go do this, and so I'm going to go try it. It's
exactly.
Every person's going to be different.
Mm-hmm.
So it said, hi Nate, when it comes to existential OCD and feelings of depersonalization, should it be treated with exposure and response prevention? How would you do it with depersonalization since it's more of a feeling? And so I don't know if you've worked much with depersonalization. I need to create a video on this. It's been on my list. But yeah.
Have you?
When it's part of just anxiety or OCD context, for me, I've used exposure and response prevention. The whole idea is, how can I, like I've said before, respond completely different to this feeling that I have, or this disconnection that I feel like I have in this moment. Whether it's I'm totally just embracing this feeling that I'm not in my body right now, or I'm outside, or I'm totally missing the conversation, whatever it is in the moment. It's instead of trying to figure out how to connect again, it's actually just embracing the moment and saying, I might totally never get back. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe. Totally. Kind of using that type of language. And sometimes it's hard to know, here's activities to do for depersonalization because it just kind of happens. But
and those could be compulsions to try to make it stop, make it go away.
Yeah.
So I did the same where it's almost just kind of notice it. It's similar to the rumination. Acknowledge it non-judgmentally. This is happening. This sucks. I'm going to allow it to be here. But as you mentioned, I've only worked with depersonalization in the context of anxiety and OCD. Now it could be caused by other things. Let's say a trauma response, in which case you might do a completely different treatment.
Yeah.
It might give you some of those coping skills to come back, and ground yourself. But in my, experience, it's kind of been I just want you to acknowledge, wow, I'm outside of my body. I might be here forever. Maybe the world doesn't really exist.
Yeah, and not trying to problem solve how to get back. It's kind of like a panic attack. We don't control panic attacks. We don't do anything with it other than just kind of embrace it. Don't try to remove the feeling, just allow it to be. And the more we take value away from that, because the body needs to learn that if you're not responding to this thing I'm telling you is scary, then maybe I need to stop giving you these signals that it's scary. And the only way for the brain to know that is to continue to teach it.
I was thinking the same thing, just in relation to panic attacks. I speak to depersonalization the exact same way.
Yeah, perfect. So I got this from Nicole. I told my parents about my Harm OCD. Nothing big, just that I had a thought of punching somebody that I love, and now the thought is worse because it made me feel like a monster. It's well, it's a good job for even telling your parents about these thoughts. I know it can be a really scary thing to do. definitely can make things feel worse because it's like now it's out in the open and people know what I'm going through. The whole idea through treatment is like, how can we take away that, not take away the feeling of being a monster, but more of like respond differently. I'm going to sound like a broken record saying that over and over again, but that's what the most important part for exposures for me is. I'm not going to put judgment to anything. And when the brain automatically does, we're just like, like it might just put some label on, but we're not responding to it in any way or another.
Congrats, Nicole. As much as I would love for everybody in the world to be educated about OCD and respond appropriately, that's kind of reality that some people, when we share our obsessions, aren't going to understand, and they might have a reaction that we don't necessarily want. But to me, that also is only going to help you in the long run with treatment, because now you have this new thought of, am I a monster? Guess what? We're going to practice that. Maybe I'm a monster. Maybe I really would do these things. Because the opposite would be if your parents like gave a lot of reassurance saying, oh my gosh, maybe you're okay, you would never punch somebody. Well, that might provide momentary relief, but in the long run worsen it. So kind of like your parents helped you out with an exposure there that you may or may not be ready for, but put it out into the world that who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah. It's so hard sometimes for parents to even know, like, they sometimes think things are phases, people will just get over it, or they don't understand it. And so like, good for you for like being able to risk that. And hopefully having some material maybe you can share with them, like, this is what Harm OCD actually is and what it looks like, to help them understand if they don't know. I've been skin picking for 5 to 6 years and it feels so natural to do now. The scarring from picking has really hurt my self-esteem. How do I stop picking after it's become pretty natural? Man, that's hard.
First, I would find somebody well-trained in skin picking, because not everybody is. And I know if you guys have probably watched Nathan, he's gone through some of the aspects of treatment. It's going to be looking at a lot of different things that are almost preceding this behavior. Is it a feeling? Is it a sensory stimulation, or a certain cognition, certain patterns, so that we can help decrease that behavior over time, or help give you the interventions to manage it better? Yeah, my biggest thing is like, find someone that knows what they're doing, because those that are untrained will probably just be like, here, you just use a stress ball every time, which could be an intervention for some, but is not going to address every single aspect.
Yeah, I like that. I usually look for somebody at BFRB.org. Is that right? Or .com, .org?
Yeah, org, I think so.
And you can go in there and put your zip code in and see if there's anyone near you. In my area, it's me and like 2 other people. And so and I'm the only one that sees kids. And so I'm like, I don't have anyone to send you to, which is, it's just so sad. I know one of the biggest things that I try to do through treatment is like take away all shame, all guilt from this behavior, whether you've done it for 5 years, 30 years, it doesn't matter. That if it happens, then it happens. And if you're wanting to do treatment, we try to learn from each experience of like, oh, where was I? What was I thinking? What was I feeling? Is there anything that preceded it that made it a little bit worse in the moment? People track those things. They do awareness training with it. A therapist can definitely take you through that. I know I just released my course that takes you through that as well. I created that only because there's hardly anyone in my area. I don't know about yours, Amanda, but
yeah, we probably have
why,
3 good ones in Kansas, and that's why I think I got licensed in some of these other states, because there just aren't a lot of BFRB specialists. So
for sure. But yeah, finding that person that's going to really lead you through what you need. And hopefully they're doing the COMB model, COMB. That's, in my opinion, the best way to go.
Yeah, agreed.
Is it common to have pain in your throat while doing ERP? Well, I'm not a doctor. So I know that lots of different things can happen while people do exposure and response prevention. They can have panic attacks. They can overload of anxiety.
Yeah,
I can't tell you for sure for yourself, but
there's such a wide variety of physical reactions with anxiety. So to me, I'm like, yeah, that is a possibility. Sometimes we feel like we have a lump in our throat or we can't breathe. So totally a possibility. Don't try too hard to solve that.
right. I love that. We're trying to solve like, why do I have this? And that comes into that like meta OCD that
Yeah.
we try not to
Now
get
we have
into.
a whole new thought.
Yeah. And so the answer sometimes might be like, maybe it is, maybe it isn't.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes people probably hear my answers are like, he just told me maybe, maybe not. Like, that's not an answer.
I know.
It really is kind of the answer.
I always think like people must be so frustrated with the majority of my responses on here because I know people want like this concrete thing to make it go away. And I'm just like, maybe it's not a lump in your throat. Maybe you have cancer. And then they're like, why would you say that?
Right.
I probably just scared that person now.
Can obsession and compulsion be important things to or analyze something is an obsession? I think when I was looking at this question, as far as I understand, are you trying to figure out why you do have an obsession or a compulsion? A lot of people come in and they want to know, why do I have this? When did it, like, is it because when I was 5, this experience happened? Is it because I watched this movie? And really it's like, that part's not important at all, in my opinion.
Yeah.
For us to figure it out doesn't seem to make much sense because you're experiencing it right now and that won't change anything. Because there usually isn't that one like, boom, this is it, why I have OCD. We know genetics plays a part, life experiences play a part, but people can get really caught up in, I need to know why I have this. And we try not to do that the best that we can.
Yep, same. And I'm glad you clarified because I didn't quite understand the question, but that makes sense. A lot of people want to know why. And again, if it's according, like I will provide some psychoeducation, that first session or two, if that's a big value of theirs is learning and understanding OCD. So we talk about that, that genetic component, that biological component. But if that becomes a new obsession where it's like, I got to figure out what thing in my childhood caused it, it's kind of like, we may never know.
Yeah. That's true. So we're just going through these quick because we've got a lot of questions and
there are a lot
of time. So yeah, I'm curious to know if hair pulling is inherited. I have several uncles and aunts that have OCD of hair pulling. So, well, first of all, I'd say OCD is kind of its own diagnosis and hair pulling is its own. BFRB, body focused repetitive behavior, actually separate diagnoses.
Yeah.
Diagnoses? I don't know what the word is. But in my experience, definitely inherited. They kind of say that like it's all on the same tree. And so where I see somebody might have hair pulling, and maybe they don't see other people in their family, then I'm like, I bet you could find out that maybe they have OCD or they have anxiety or they have panic disorder or they have something that kind of falls on that same tree. But usually if I see somebody that comes through my office that has a BFRB, we can find somebody else in their family down their line that does. And some of those older generations didn't ever talk about it. And so it's hard to get that data for sure.
Oh, completely. Yeah, I think it's good to clarify that BFRBs are not OCD and vice versa. However, they both fall under this category of obsessive compulsive and related disorder. So some people think they're all the same thing. There are a few similarities, but they have different treatments. And so there are comorbid conditions though. So there might be, if you have a BFRB, you might also have OCD, but there's different things.
Yeah. Carly here. My question is, how can somebody learn to cope with obsessions related to depressing thoughts? And so, no, this activity isn't pointless. Let's think real hard as to why this is awesome. So kind of a statement like that tends to be more like motivational than it would be kind of like exposure and response prevention. So coping with thoughts like this, depending on whatever the depressing thought is, like I kind of said it before, but how can we take power away from whatever that thought is that's coming, that makes a person feel like this is a depressing thought? That if I have a thought that comes to my mind, like, so for instance, my kids were playing on the driveway the other day and they just go down. I tell them every time, look for cars, look for cars, look for cars. And I go inside to like get some water for them. And my brain's like, oh, it's gonna be that one time you walk in and they get hit by a car. Pretty depressing thought, and I can see everything. If I'm like, run out as fast as I can, I'm like, I can't believe I had this thought, I can't believe I even thought all those things, then I just put a lot of power and said, ooh, this is a depressing thought. But if what I did is I walked in and I'm like, that could totally happen. I might come out, something major might happen. Oh, I'm so glad that I even had that thought right now. Like, that's amazing. That, like, I literally said that to myself to take the power away from a depressing type of thought. And at least that's how I take care of it, is even say the complete opposite of what I'm really thinking about it. So my body knows that I don't really care that I had this thought right now.
Yeah, otherwise it's going to pop up every single time you run inside.
Yeah. And we don't have to use logic really to like, this activity is, isn't pointless. And I know motivation comes from doing the things we don't want to do. And so I usually focus on, well, what do I want to do? Do I want to go do this activity? Even if I don't feel like it, if I do, then I'm going to go do it. And usually we don't regret things like that. So hopefully I grasp what your question actually was instead of go off on a tangent, but you never know.
I think it made sense.
Okay. Sometimes I'm like, man, we're coming to the end of these questions, and then it just like refreshes a whole new, a lot of them. Jess, can OCD make you feel like you're not good at something? Because last year, after getting thoughts that I could be bad at my favorite subject when I'm really good, I got confused, and now I can't get over it.
Yeah, I feel like it's called the doubting disease for a reason. It could cause doubt and uncertainty in anything. I get asked, I don't know about you, Nathan, all the time, like, can you have intrusive thoughts about this? Can OCD make you think about this? And it's like, it could be about anything. There's no subject that's, it can't touch. It'll cause some kind of doubt there.
Yeah, I like that you said that. It really just can make you doubt about literally anything. It doesn't even matter. My OCD fear is hurting my dog. I'm always looking for the things that I may use to harm her, which I would never do, then don't know if I did or not. Kind of going again with that doubting. The brain tends to attack what we care about and what we value. And, you must value your dog quite a bit. And it can make people believe they're doing certain things, even when they're not. But we don't try to use logic with that. We don't say like, no, I didn't really, like the scissors are still over here. I didn't really do that. Because then it'll just make us doubt all over again. And so responding completely different to it. I don't know if you have an idea, Amanda, of how someone could respond to this or how they can change that.
And this may not be true for David, but I'm thinking, common compulsions would be mentally reviewing, just kind of going back over the situation. Okay, did I do anything? Did I hurt my dog? Or going and checking the weapons in the house. Okay, did they move? So which case we're going to try something a little bit different. If that compulsion is to go look for weapons, I'm going to say, no, I just want you to stay there on the couch and watch your favorite show and not know, maybe you did stab your dog. We'll find out.
Yeah, which sounds so horrible to be like, I think I just even said that or think that. But like, that's what we kind of have to do. Kind of like I said with my kids going down the street, I'm like, you totally get hit. Like, I have to think about that in a completely different way.
Yeah, it sounds awful. I've done the same thing with kids getting hit by a car. I'm just kind of like, well, I guess I could. Maybe it'll happen. Which is very tough, but it takes that power away.
I usually focus on when there's a problem, we can fix it. but we actually have to see a problem. We don't look for it, but you think of any problem that's ever risen in our life, like we fixed it in some way.
I know this sounds awful, but I'm like, if my kid actually gets hit by a car, then I get to problem solve it. Then I get to figure out what I'm going to do. But until then, I have made up the scenario in my head. There's nothing to solve.
Right. I suffer from HOCD, or sexual orientation OCD, 10 years ago. What should I do to overcome this? And so, well, usually when I look at that word overcome, I'm like, ooh, there's the trap right there. Because if we're trying to overcome that, then the brain's going to continually look for, what can I do to get over this, not have these thoughts anymore, not have these feelings, not whatever it is. And that's the complete opposite. Is like, just so, like we said with rumination, we try not to get rid of thoughts, just let them be. Same thing with something like this. We don't want to get rid of it, just let it be and respond completely different to it. So exposure and response prevention is the therapy people use. Finding a therapist is great for that as well. I go to IOCDF. That's kind of my go-to place. People are on there. I mean, I would assume you wouldn't go through all the work to be on that website if you didn't care enough to.
I agree. I trust anyone that's on there, because who would put themselves on that website if they're not specialists?
Yeah. And so. Got another BFRB. I spend an alarming amount of time searching and looking through my hair with my hands. It prevents me from doing the things I want to do because my hands feel glued to my head. Man, super common. I don't know if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, using, the treatment that both Nathan and I recommend, comb model, I would be looking at, again, what patterns are you getting some kind of sensory stimulation from it? Like some people, I know when I pull hair, it's like, I love just the feeling of pulling it through my fingertips. Or is there a certain cognition that pops up? Like when you're searching, are you searching for something certain? Like, is it that, weird hair that kind of sticks out? But we would look for different patterns as to why this is happening, what precedes it. So then we can give you the appropriate interventions, whether it's some kind of sensory substitution or working on some of those thoughts that come before.
I like that. My first thought was sensory with this. That's the big piece. If someone's looking through their hair, they're feeling something, they're looking for something, whether it's a coarse hair or it's a certain feeling. That's the thing we really want to pay attention to. And like Amanda said earlier, find a specialist that can hopefully help you recognize when you're doing that and maybe make a different choice, whatever that competing response is, which you probably don't know what that word is, but the therapist will definitely kind of teach you. Natalie, I am autistic with PCOS and really have struggled with BFRBs as a STEM for 16 years. It's a lot of little acronyms. I've made a list of 78 things I have tried to stop, but I still spend hours doing it every day. Any ideas? I know for me, I have people come up with realistic goals for themselves. Like, what is realistic? I hardly ever see, I don't know your experience, Amanda, but hardly ever see somebody who's like 100%, I don't ever want to do this again, and I'm just good not doing it. There's usually like I want to not do it maybe like 70% of the time, but there's still that 30% I still want to do it, which is totally normal and natural. And so you kind of think of like hours a day, is that manageable? Is that good? Is that okay? Were we looking for 100% for that to not happen? It kind of sounds like you don't want to, since you kind of mentioned the question, but I don't know, any thoughts on this, Amanda?
Yeah, setting up realistic goals. That's, I think, one of the first things we talk about with treatment, because if you go in saying, I never want to pull a hair again, what's going to happen? And that's going to lead to then all these subsequent feelings, shame and embarrassment. And so instead, like, my goal tends to be like, can we utilize interventions and keep increasing utilizing the interventions And what those would be for Natalie, again, could be different from person to person. You'll want your specialist to help figure out, what are you getting from this behavior? And as you mentioned, probably possibly a STEM behavior. So find your specialist and set realistic goals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I have people, we come up with competing responses or strategies that they're going to use. And I'm like, if it didn't work the first time, you don't just move to the next thing.
Yes.
It's a skill. You practice, practice, practice. So if you have 78 things, I bet one of those things works.
Oh, I'm sure.
And if not multiple of them. But it's figuring out how to make it more meaningful. Because a lot of people might say like, okay, well, I'm going to pick up a fidget and they just told me to play with it. But it's like, that's not what the treatment is. We're not just picking up a fidget and then just moving on with our merry way. We're making it really meaningful and beneficial of like, what am I feeling in this moment? What are these urges that I'm feeling? What are the thoughts I'm having?
Yeah.
It's making that the treatment more meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
And so probably got time for maybe like one or two. We've got appointments coming up, but someone asked if I suffer with OCD. I actually don't have OCD myself, but I used to have a lot of social anxiety, and I did exposures for that without even knowing what I was doing.
I'm sure your YouTube and everything has helped with that a lot.
Man, that's helped quite a bit.
Yes.
All right, we got Emily. My POCD is triggered by almost everything. It manages to creep into every situation and is so tiring. It makes me doubt everything is as normal. Man, yeah, doubting disease, kind of what Amanda mentioned earlier. When I think about those triggers, whether you're ready for it or not, I say like write them all down, which can be a trigger in itself. Mm-hmm. But I was at the park, I was at the play place, I was here. That like those are great things to show a therapist to say, here's all my triggers. How can we face these essentially and respond completely different to
adding them to your list to practice eventually.
Mm-hmm. People's worlds start shrinking and shrinking and shrinking because they're like, ooh, I can't go to parks anymore. Oh, I can't walk on this trail anymore. I can't watch this TV show. Mm-hmm. The more times people start giving those up, the more they're going to notice those triggers from what I see.
Yeah, that avoidance is one of the most common compulsions.
Mm-hmm. Because their body's on guard now. It's like, uh-oh, don't want to run into this. You got to be careful. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry that's even happening in your life. Like POCD is tough, but we treat it the same as any other type of OCD. Okay. I just do this last question here. I pull my hair, and when I do it, I'm generally unaware until I've pulled a lot. How can I stop doing this? Kind of like we mentioned earlier, super common to have that automatic pulling. Mm-hmm. Any suggestions or thoughts?
Yeah, some of my go-tos when I hear about the automatic or unconscious kind of pulling or picking, first, and we've already talked about this at the beginning, about finding all of our patterns, our triggers, our sensations, just to help build that awareness. But then I'm a big fan of habit blockers. Let's say whether it's like something you put over your finger or it's one of those bands that alerts you when your wrist is moving. Mm-hmm. Because not only will it help increase that awareness, let's say something on your finger, as soon as you go to try to pick your skin and you can't get to it, it's going to bring awareness to, oh, I was about to pick my skin, or I would have if I didn't have that thing on. But also it just actually blocks the behavior. So you just physically can't do it. So I like to look at any of those strategies to build awareness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's wearing a piece of tape or a Band-Aid on your finger, you're going to notice something feels different. Mm-hmm. And if you have a specific tracking form that you use, I have a few that I give out, but it's, what time is it? What am I doing? How am I feeling? Am I searching for anything? To write it down in that specific moment. Like, wow, like you're going to find patterns. It always happens when I'm in the car. It always happens when I'm sitting on the right side of the couch. That you're going to know the next time you're in that specific spot, you're going to feel probably that urge to do it. And so we need to have something different about that specific moment, or else it's probably going to be the same as it's always been. And so awareness training is pretty darn big. So, well, there are so many other questions, and at least what I'd love you to do is like copy them like right now and then paste it into the comments, because they disappear for like 24 hours and I can't see them, and then they'll come back. But I'd love to answer them as many as I can in the comments if you can do that. I know, I'm so glad that I had Amanda to help me with this. It's amazing.
Thank you for having me. I feel bad. There's so many questions, but you'll get to all of them.
Yeah. When you can go in too and answer some.
Yeah. Oh, great.
Let's give you some work to do.
Yeah.
Amanda has a great Instagram page. Did I get that right? Anxiety
Yeah.
OCD treatment.
Thank you.
And like, it's awesome. She posts so many things that are just like, when I see it, I'm like, that's totally true. Like, I love it. And just want to share
Put it out there.
I know you can find kind of your coloring book in there as well, exposure coloring book. And I'd say go follow her, like if you want to build that motivation with treatment. And so, yeah. Any thoughts, Amanda, before?
No, thank you. And same, in the chance that any of my viewers are watching this, because I put it on my Instagram page, make sure you follow Nathan. What yours is, OCD and anxiety treatment?
Yeah, OCD and anxiety online.
Online, that's it.
Yeah, it's interesting. All of our names are kind of like the same,
like the
different formats.
I needed those
do have my
words. There you go.
Yeah, I do have my online course for OCD and anxiety online. I'll put all the links down there as well, and then the BFRB ones, so hair pulling, skin picking. But yeah, go down in the description. You can see those in there. And so, but I appreciate it. Make sure you put those comments in so we can answer them for you. And thank you for being here. I appreciate you guys.
Thank you, everyone.